stitches, elastic and hemming. That is literally all you need to make this skirt. So if you want to find out how to make this in less than 10 minutes, then make sure you keep on watching. So to start, I'm laying my fabric in half, and we are going to use a fabric to actually mark out the pattern and all the measurements that we need for this skirt. So to start, I'm just marking or measuring longer than I think I'm going to need for this skirt, and that's just going to kind of give me the parameters that we're working with for this. Now I'm just going to add my seam allowance to that marking. Initially I made the mistake of just adding all the seam allowance for like the top and the bottom in the same place. I corrected that later on. Yeah, the seam allowance that you'll need at this point, which is the top, is 1 inch seam allowance, and that is so that we can add our elastic later on. So I'm just going to mark that and then draw a line for it. And let's just ignore the additional line that I'm drawing here, as it's going to be corrected later on. From our waist point, which is just underneath the seam allowance, we're going to mark our waist to our hip length. And to do that, as you can see, I folded the fabric in half and I'm marking that length close to where it's folded, but also the midpoint as well, and then I'm going to connect the dots. And I'm doing that just to make sure that we have a straight line going across. So we're marking from our waist to the length that we want the skirt to be. Granted, I'm a petite babe, so I ended up making my skirt 30.5 including seam allowance, so it would be 30 without seam allowance because we're adding half an inch seam allowance. So yeah, we're just again going to mark out those measurements at different points along the width, and then we're going to connect the dots. Now we can go in with our horizontal markings, as I like to call it. The first one is going to be our waist circumference. So for that, we're going to measure our waist divided by 4, and we're going to mark that point, the measurement divided by 4 onto the fabric. So mine is 6.5 for the waist, and then for the hip it was 10 inches. So again, our hip circumference divided by 4. I'm kind of measuring down at the midpoint in terms of what my thigh circumference was, like just above my knees, and I'll kind of mark that as well, just so that it helps me gauge the shape that I want this skirt to be, as I do want it to be quite fitted. So now that I've made those points, all we're going to do is grab our ruler, or French curve in this case, and we're going to connect the dots. As you can see, I'm rubbing out my mistake of the additional half an inch seam allowance that I added to the top that we mentioned before. So I'm going in and I'm connecting the dots, so our waist to our hip, and our hip to the hem or the length of the skirt. As you'll see, I don't connect the dots exactly just because it's stretchy fabric, so it's kind of going to give room for our hips anyway. So I'm also focusing on getting the shape that I want as I'm making these markings or connecting these dots. And then once we have done that, I'm going to go in with my scissors and we can cut out this shape. Now we're taking the rest of our fabric and we're laying that flat on our surface, and then we're going to grab that first skirt piece that we've cut out and we're going to lay it flat on top. If you can tell the right side of your fabric, then you want to make sure that right sides are facing here, and then we're just going to mimic or cut the shape of the first piece to cut out the identical second piece. Now we're going to lay our skirt pieces together, right sides facing, and we're going to pin or clip the sides of the skirt, and then all we're going to do is stitch it down. So I have used a overcast stitch for the majority of this skirt just because it is a scuba and it's stretching it. Granted, if you have a serger or if you just want to do a zigzag stitch instead, you can use that to make these stitches. At this point you want to try on your skirt and adjust as needed. So I ended up taking in the skirt a bit more, as you can see, so I'm just trimming off the excess before we go to the next step. So we're moving on to adding our elastic. Our elastic is going to be our waist circumference. I'm not adding seam allowance to the elastic just because I want it to have a tiny bit of a tighter fit. So as you can see, what I'm going to do is line up the one end of my elastic, so I'm going to overlap it like so, and I'm going to pin that to the one side of the elastic, and then I'm going to make sure that it's flat so I can find what the other side of the elastic is, and I'm going to pin that to the other side of our skirt. Then what I'm going to do is add as many pins in place to make sure that the elastic is secure all the way around, as you can see. And then what we're going to do, we're going to stitch around the entirety of elastic with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance just to hold it in place. So to hide the elastic, all we're going to do is fold it like so on for the side seam, and we're just going to stitch along this line or stitch in the ditch, just hold the elastic in place. And we're going to do the same for the other side as well, and that's going to prevent the elastic from flipping over once we have stitched it. I'm actually kind of shocked that we're at the last step, and that is hemming. So what I did first is I did an overcast stitch around the entirety of the hem, and I did that just to make sure that the hem didn't fray once I had stitched it. And then once I had done that overcast hem, I folded up the skirt by 1/2 inch all the way around and added my clips to hold that in place. To finalize or to do this hem, I ended up using a twin needle stitch. I do have a short demo on how to use them if you want to check it out. Alternatively, you can use a zigzag stitch or even a triple straight stitch or any of the stretchy stitches that I'd recommend. Again, I have another video about that. But this is what the hem and the entirety of the skirt came out looking like in the end. Let me know what you think, and also let me know how you would style this, because I'm kind of struggling at the moment. Maybe I will make a part 2 where I show you how to make a corset, but in the meantime, make sure you check out this video next, which is going to help you with stretchy fabrics.